Okay, perfect. I make it 12, so we'll kick things off. Good morning, or good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our July's Wellbeing talk. So the time has changed, which is what the good morning was. It definitely throws me still. We've got the incredible Anna with us today. I will let her introduce herself, but she's going to be talking to us all about things about talking with coping and financial stress and avoiding financial vulnerability. Not only is Anna a financial advisor, but she's also an integrative counsellor, as well as lots of other areas of expertise. But like I said, I will let her introduce herself properly. The talk will be around 45 minutes. We just kindly ask that everybody keeps their cameras off and their mics off, just to stop any lagging or anything with the internet. We're going to have a short Q&A at the end, so please use the chat facility, and then we'll be able to kind of cover any questions that you have at the end as well. We also have a short feedback form that we'd really appreciate you just taking the time to fill in once the talk's all done. Without further ado, over to you, Anna.
Hi, thank you very much. Right, bear with me while I just share my screen with everyone. I've been practicing because I always have a few problems with this. Can everyone see this yet? Hold on.
Not yet. Oh yeah, perfect. Can see it, Anna.
There we go. Here we go. There we are. Well, thank you so much, Lucy, for that introduction. And it's really great to be here today. I'm really proud of my relationship with the Electrical Industries Charity. I really believe in everything they do, and I've had the pleasure of working with a lot of your clients, either through the counselling side of things or through financial planning. And they've just been a delight to work with, and I'm really pleased to be supporting you. In terms of what I do, so as Lucy mentioned, I began my career in counselling and then moved into financial planning. And I just sort of realised that the two actually merged very well together in the idea of financial well-being. I work with a company called Adams and Bowles. Don't let the wealth management turn you off. The idea is for everyone to find their sort of path when it comes to finances and to feel safe and in control of what they do with their money. They are also a partner practice of someone called St James's Place. So it's those funds that are used in terms of pensions and ISAs and things like that. So a little bit about what we're going to cover today. I do talk fast, so we'll try to slow down a little bit. I'm just going to sort of give you a bit of a sort of background as to me, who I am and what I do. And then we'll move into talking about the importance of financial well-being and why I'm so passionate about it. I'm then going to give a bit of advice on debt management, budgeting and saving, future-proofing, retirement planning. And something that I'm really passionate about is kind of recognising the life events that emotionally and financially test us, because that's one of the reasons that A, I became a counsellor, and B, I became a financial planner, because life events really had a big impact on me, and I really wanted people not to be in the same position that I was in. And I also talk about how good financial planning can help, how it can help ease that sort of financial stress and make you feel more in control of your financial future. And then we'll talk a little bit about how we can help. And when I say we, I mean myself, but also the Electrical Industries Charity. So I sort of started off my career in a very sort of glamorous world of magazines. So working for Condé Nast, working on magazines such as Glamour, GQ, Tatler. It was wonderful. But fundamentally, why I loved it was working with people. I then moved into work for BBC Countryfile Live, which is a big live event. And again, I was all about working with big brands and people. I then had lockdown and I noticed that I had the opportunity, as I was no longer working, to retrain in an area I've always been passionate about, and that was as a counsellor. So I got my qualifications. I got to work for 3 years on my diploma. It was just wonderful. And then I moved on to becoming a financial planner. And this is why. In terms of my journey to financial well-being, I grew up with a bank manager father, so money was always in the background, but he was very cautious with money. He always encouraged us to work hard and to make sure we always save really hard and that we don't take too much risk. I was then very fortunate to have that good career I mentioned, so working for Condé Nast and then BBC Countryfile Live. When I was at Condé Nast, I was married. I was with someone for 17 years and I fell pregnant. It was planned. And he then left me for someone else whilst I was pregnant, which left me in quite a bad emotional state, but also, very, very vulnerable. At that point, I was actually the breadwinner. I had done very well in my career. I'd had bought a couple of houses, and that actually led to a very expensive divorce where I lost some houses. I lost quite a bit of my money, my backup, if you would like. But then I had my daughter. I went back to Condé Nast, and then I was made and then I was made voluntary redundant. It worked out great because I had my daughter. The plan had been to take a bit of time off with my daughter, but then I was offered the job at BBC Countryfile Live, and that was sort of too good to be true in that it was 3 days a week, mostly from home, 1 day in London, which meant I was very much more around for my daughter. I got a year's salary, but what I did, based on my father's advice, was just put it in a cash ISA. So it was really easily accessible. Which means it wasn't really growing. It wasn't really keeping pace with inflation. It was just there. I then had a 10-year sort of career gap in terms of I was working for BBC Countryfile Live, but I also had another baby because I met someone else. And it meant because I was self-employed, I wasn't contributing to a pension. I wasn't necessarily thinking about things like emergency funds. So I had a 10-year kind of gap of pension contributions. During that time, lockdown happened. I lost my job, even though I was self-employed in the event space. And that's when I just decided to retrain as a counsellor. During that time, my second marriage broke down due to him having sort of chronic back pain and an opioid addiction. So again, another big life event. But the second marriage breakdown happened when I was retraining as a counsellor. I then had to make sure I was waitressing because I didn't really have any income, and I was trying to get my counselling hours. I went on universal credit. I was basically somewhere I never thought I would be. I was completely financially vulnerable, no emergency fund. And then St James's Place approached me. They saw the work I was doing on LinkedIn in terms of financial wealth, kind of talk about well-being, and they knew about my skills in terms of people and relationships. And they loved the integrity and the empathy and the good listening skills that counselling brought into my world. So I retrained as a financial planner. Very, very intense. I had 6 months while struggling 2 children to take all my qualifications, but I did it. I passed. And now what I do is I balance a portfolio career. I'm still self-employed. That is counselling and also financial planning. So I cannot counsel my financial clients, and I can't counsel and I can't give financial advice to my counselling clients. But it is a world that sort of sits very nicely together, as I mentioned, because my passion is very much financial well-being. So today I'm here to sort of make sure that everyone is future-proof, that people avoid making the mistakes that I made, i.e. putting big lump sums into just a cash ISA when it has the potential to growth, i.e. not contributing to a pension, not having the right insurances in terms of kind of income protection and critical illness cover. I just really want people not to make the same mistakes as I did. So what is financial well-being? It's about feeling secure and in control. And as my story probably told you, that's the one thing I didn't feel. And what I really wanted was to kind of feel calm and to know that I could pay the bills and deal with the unexpected, and that I was on track for a healthy financial future. So when I work with both counselling clients and also finance clients, I really want them to leave their time with me feeling confident and empowered. So the reason I talk a lot about financial well-being is that if we have financial education support, it really can help improve mental health outcomes. So of those who have received advice or guidance, 84% say they benefited mentally or emotionally from that guidance. And the Money Advice Service has reported that individuals who receive financial education and advice experience less financial stress and improved mental well-being. So there is a direct link between financial stress and financial vulnerability and poor mental health. And then we come on to debt, which I was actually very fortunate. I didn't have much debt. And I think that goes back to my bank manager father, in that I only ever had one credit card that I paid off each month. And I was very mindful just to not take out any loans when that may have been the easiest option. But I completely recognize that some people have no choice but to do that. But debt and financial insecurity has such a detrimental impact on mental health. And again, the research by the Money and Mental Health Policy Institute revealed that individuals with debt are twice as likely to experience mental health issues compared to those without debt. So what is debt? We have some good debt and we have some bad debt. So we also need to bear in mind that we still need to have a good credit rating score. So it's okay to have credit cards, but try and make sure you pay them off monthly. If you can't do that, always make sure that you're on 0%. There are personal loans. That could take the form potentially of maybe a lease car. I have to say I do lease a car now. That felt to me quite a good option because I knew exactly how much that car would cost me each month. And as a single mum, I sort of didn't want to keep paying out for car repairs. So I do that, and I would then keep switching my car every 18 months to manage that. Overdrafts. I certainly sat in those as a student, but again, just be very mindful that that isn't free money. You still pay interest on it. And mortgages. Now, it's interesting. I work with a lot of financial clients at the moment who are just desperate to pay off their mortgage. And I understand that, but also mortgages in some ways are probably the cheapest borrowing that you can do. It also helps with your kind of credit score. And it's also bear in mind that if you completely pay off your mortgage, what you're sitting on is an asset, a house that is illiquid. So you cannot access that money quickly. So just to sort of bear that in mind when you're sort of nearing 16, you're thinking, oh, should I just pay off my mortgage? There may be better things you could do. And then we have the terrifying idea of payday loans. And I really appreciate that some people have no choice, but I'm hoping that people can come to us before that happens. So how do you keep in control of your debt? So keeping track of what you owe. So whether that is to credit cards, whether it is to payday loans, or whether it is to family and friends, make sure you're prioritising essential debts. So that's going to be the rent, the mortgage, council tax, utility bills, and create a realistic budget. Try not to hide away from the problem. The earlier you can contact creditors, the better shape you're going to be in. And if you're in really dire straits, consider a debt management plan if you have multiple debts. And where can you get help? Well, as with counselling and with financial planning, help is free, it's confidential, and it's non-judgmental. So with financial planning, it's not necessarily free, but it is confidential and non-judgmental. So Step Change are fantastic. I know that's a charity that the electrical industries use. We have the National Debt Line, we have Citizens Advice, we have Money Helper, and also speak to your local council. They may be able to help you maybe with your council tax bill, or maybe just with some financial wellbeing support. Next, we're going to move on to budgeting. Honestly, budgeting is so important. And once you get into the swing of it, it becomes really easy. So just bear in mind that the more control you can take with your money, the less stress you're going to have and the more peace of mind you have. And it isn't just about kind of putting numbers in a spreadsheet. It's about making you feel really confident and secure and in control of your life. You know, when we think about wellness, we often think about the emotional wellness, the environmental wellness, the social wellness, but financial wellness sits there too. And it's really important just to feel as in control as possible. So when it comes to budgeting, really recognise what your income is, because it might just not come from a regular salary. So you've got your wages or your salary after tax, that's really important. You may have some state benefits or some pension payments, and you may have other sources of income. So that could be child maintenance, it could be side jobs, it could be selling on Vinted. Just really sort of bear in mind the money that's coming in. Next, keep track of your spending. So keep a record for at least a month. If possible, I'd really recommend just doing it as an ongoing project. You know, every time you buy something, every time money comes in, you put it into either an app or into an Excel spreadsheet. I'm not a massive fan of Excel spreadsheet, but I use it a lot. Next, when it comes to your spending, break it down into categories. So you have essentials such as rent, mortgage, utilities, food, and then you have those non-essentials. I'm not saying don't have any non-essentials, don't have that coffee, don't have that takeaway, but bear in mind, those are the areas where you can cut back if you have to. So be really realistic with yourself and just, you know, it could be that for maybe a couple of months, you don't have takeaways, just to make sure you're in a better financial situation. There are also lots of nice spending tracker apps out there, Money Dashboard, Emma, or even your own bank's apps. I really recommend them all. So set yourself a monthly budget and review it and adjust it regularly, because what tends to happen with monthly outgoings or monthly incomes is they can actually shift each month. So just bear that in mind. So use the 50-30-20 rule as a starting point. So 50% are on those main needs. So that's the bills, that's the food, that's the housing. Then you have 30% on your wants. So that's entertainment, that's non-essentials, and then 20% ideally into savings. But obviously, if you have any debt, make sure that's going into debt repayment. And then you must make sure that you're reviewing and you're adjusting regularly. And hopefully through working in this way, things will change and be more positive, but just check on a weekly or monthly basis that you are doing these things. And also just try and cut back where you can. Honestly, I find things like Money Supermarket incredible, because the amount of times I've managed to save money on all of my utilities, on all of my insurances, it makes such a difference just to take that pause, you know, maybe dedicate, I don't know, a couple of hours each week to just really looking at your finances to make you feel more in control. And also think about some saving goals. So an emergency fund is so vital, and I will take you onto that a bit later on. But also we want you to have holidays if you can afford it. And obviously we've all got to save for Christmas. So really think about those saving goals and make sure that you're sort of contributing to those when you can. So a few more sort of budgeting tools that I think could be quite helpful. So we have the Money Helper, Budget Planner. Again, Systems Advice is always so helpful for things, and they offer budgeting tools. And again, go to your bank's mobile app. So often they have sort of tools for helping you budget, because they obviously want you to stay on the straight and narrow as well. So the best protection is future proofing. So I would say that's where I went a little bit wrong, because I just didn't expect my life to kind of go in a different direction as it did. So the more you can have things like regular savings habits, you're more likely to be more satisfied with your life. It will help you improve well-being, and it will help you feel nice and optimistic about the future. You know, we want you all relaxing and sleeping well and being satisfied with life overall. And the more sort of peace of mind you can have with your finances, the better. And that's when we think about future proofing. So an emergency fund, this is the first thing I actually talk to my clients about, because it is so important. And if I'd have had an emergency fund, I don't think I'd have been quite as stressed as I was. So the Money Advice Service recommends a saving pot that equates to 3 months of expenditure to make sure that unforeseen costs are covered. So that could be that, you know, your boiler breaks down, your car breaks down. It's just making sure that you don't have to put those sorts of issues onto a credit card. And what I would say is perhaps spread that emergency fund into different areas. So it could be cash, it could be a current account, it could be a savings account, it could be an ISA. But just make sure you're really thinking about those 3 months of expenditure. Something, again, I talk about a lot. And actually, when I first sort of went into financial advice, I was sitting next to this really nice girl called Amy, who I still sit next to when I'm in the shared office. And she said to me, "Have you got a lasting power of attorney?" I said, "No, I've just done those for my parents. I don't need that. I'm not that old." A lasting power of attorney is so important, because you need to bear in mind, as she said to me, you could be run over by a bus tomorrow. We have really jolly conversations at our desk. But you need to bear in mind that even if you live with your partner, they may not have access to some of your bank accounts, and vice versa. It's just how we are, especially as we're becoming more financially independent as couples. It may be that you have a joint account for the bills and you have separate accounts for your own money. But if you lose capacity, they will not be able to access those automatically. You also need to bear in mind that if should something happen to you, who is going to manage those finances? You want to make sure that your home can't be sold if you don't want it to be sold. And you also need to bear in mind who's going to sort of look after your medical care. So a lasting power of attorney is a legal document that means that someone you trust can make important financial and health decisions for you should you lose mental capacity in the future. You can also highlight, which I have done, who you would not wish to make those decisions. You can have this drawn up by a solicitor or a special will writer, or alternatively, if you go to the government website, you can download one. They're £82 for a finance one, and they're £82 for a health one. And what you need is to decide on who you would like to be your power of attorney. You need someone to witness it, to check that you are in legal mind, and then you just send all the documents off. But I would strongly, this is absolutely on the top of your to-do list. The other area on the top of your to-do list is a will. Far too many people are dying interstate, which means that because they don't have a will and they don't have a nearest and dearest, their estate is just distributed wherever. So if they haven't got a nearest and dearest, it goes to the Crown, which is why they're so wealthy. So just sort of bear in mind that you've worked so hard to make your money, you want it to go to the right place. So at the moment, 51% of UK adults are currently without a will. And what's really scary is this actually increases to 72% for those aged 35 to 54. The reason this is so scary is that is the bulk of people who will have children at this stage. And if both of you die, there is the chance your children could go into care until the suitable person is decided by a court as to who should raise them. So it's so straightforward to get a will written up, and I would really recommend it. The next area is financial protection. So I am self-employed, so I make sure I have income protection insurance, because if I get ill, there is no one to rely on but myself. You know, I can get a little bit of money from the state, but not very much. So income protection pays a tax-free monthly income if you're unable to work due to illness or injury. So anyone who is self-employed, I massively encourage them to take this out. Life insurance is incredibly important if you have a mortgage and if you have dependents, because what you don't want to happen is, should something happen to you and you die, that your house has to be sold to pay off that mortgage. So this pays out a tax-free lump sum or an income to your dependents when you die, depending on what you want to take. And again, critical illness cover is something I absolutely have as well, because again, because I'm self-employed, I need to make sure that I'm looked after. Should I get a critical illness. It pays out a tax-free lump sum if you're diagnosed with a critical illness. You have some policies like Vitality that will pay out more than once. And actually, someone like Vitality, I think they actually cover something like 131 critical illnesses. So it's just a really, really important to sort of make sure you have that protection to, again, to give you that peace of mind at night, especially if you're self-employed or if you have dependents or you have someone who relies on you. The next area to look at is tax efficient savings. So as I mentioned earlier, I did use my ISA for my voluntary redundancy, but I just used a cash ISA. At the moment, you have an annual allowance of 20,000. They're slightly talking about changing that for cash ISAs, because the government is very keen for us to start investing and is talking a lot about stocks and shares ISA. I do feel if I'd have put my money in the stocks and shares ISA, it would have grown more than it did in the cash ISA. That's something I've only learned since I retrained as a financial planner. We also have lifetime ISAs. They're good if you want to buy property or receive an income. I think after 40, I don't look after lifetime ISAs, but also the bonus of those is that you do get 25% back from the government. The limit tends to be about £4,000 a month, and then with the money back from the government, it tends to take it up to 5,000. The areas where I would question is they tend to set a limit for the value of the property that you can buy. At the moment, I think it's about 400,000. So if you live in London, that's pretty impossible. We then have junior ISAs, and that has a tax-free allowance of 9,000. One of my colleagues who I trained with as a financial planner, she's 24 and she's just buying a 4-bedroom house in Surrey with a very healthy deposit, because her parents put £100 a month into a stocks and shares junior ISA from the moment she was born, and she's now accessing it now. And because of sort of the investment journey and compound interest, something I'll talk to you about later on, she's done very well out of it. So yeah, the longer you can save, even if it's just a tiny amount, the biggest difference it will make. So how much you need to retire. So my big thing with pensions, obviously now most of us are automatically enrolled, but is to start the pension as early as possible so that you have as long as possible for that money to grow. But if you want an income of 20,000, for example, how you work it out is you multiply it by 25. So that would mean you would need a pension fund of £500,000 to have an annual income of 20,000 a year. So we're talking about big funds that we need to grow. And bear in mind that investing in a pension is investing in yourself, because you've worked really hard and you should have the retirement you enjoy and or you deserve. And also you need to bear in mind you get free money for the government, because they want you to rely on your own pension rather than the state pension. So if you're a basic rate taxpayer, say you pay £80 a month, you would get £20 back from the government. Higher rate taxpayer, you pay £60, you get £40 back from the government. You need to bear in mind with higher rate taxpayers and additional rate taxpayers that you have to do a tax return in order to claim the additional tax relief back. So always make sure you do that. I've had a lot of clients who've done very well from that piece of information, because once you get that tax relief back, you can also reinvest it back into your pension. Now, again, sort of something that had a bit of an effect on me with my sort of cash savings is the damage of inflation. So you need to bear in mind that inflation is the idea of things going up in price. So as we all know, milk is very expensive now, butter is very expensive now. What it means is that inflation actually erodes the power of your cash. So say you put 10,000 back in 20 years ago, today it would be worth almost half that. So it's bearing in mind that the cost of inflation erodes the amount of cash you have. And this sort of talks a little bit about why investing makes sense. And again, it talks about always thinking long term. So my person I train with who did very well with her house deposit is because her parents put those funds away for 24 years. Now, the idea with investing is that it does actually involve some risk. So that's why we talk about having emergency funds, having savings, being careful with your money. But if you have a little bit of extra money, investing in something like a stocks and shares ISA would make a lot of sense. So the green line is equities, i.e. shares in companies, and it shows just how much it goes up and down despite all of the world events. So the war in Ukraine, the coronavirus, the China slowdown. But as you can see, when you compare it to cash and inflation, although it's very rocky, you can see the actual investment of your money does dramatically better. That's also based a lot on the idea of compound interest, which is something I've only just learned. It's called the eighth wonder of the world, according to Einstein. And how I teach this to children when I do financial wellbeing in schools is that you need to think about blocks. So imagine you've got a block that's a bit of money, and then you add another block, and you add another block, and you add another block, because it's basically growth on top of growth. So it's interest on top of interest in your savings. And what this looks like is all about the idea of time. So if you have Anne and she invested £200 a month, but her friend Belinda invested £400 a month but started 10 years later, because Anne has had the benefit of compounding, i.e. investing for longer, her savings have grown by an extra 14,503 compared to Belinda. So as I say, it's not necessarily about the amount of money you're putting away, it's about the time you take with that money. So making sure that any little extra bits of money you've got, you put away for it to grow for the rainy days we always talk about. So I talked about a few life events that really shook my world, and we really need to think about these life events that not only really scar us emotionally, but they also really test us financially. So that could be, as I went through, divorce. It could be having a new baby. It could be bereavement, illness, moving house, retirement, redundancy. It's sort of, and again, this goes back to this idea of future proofing. The more sort of future proofing you can do, the more protected you are against these life events. So when it comes to things like divorce, separation, relationship breakdowns, obviously a lot of the time relationship problems and strain can be caused by financial problems. So a survey by Relate found that financial worries were a key factor in relationship breakdowns, with 26% of respondents citing money as a major source of conflict in their relationships. I'm actually surprised that statistic is so low, because in my counselling area, I have to say that finances come up a lot. In terms of the sort of pressure and strain it puts on relationships, and how so many couples have very different ideas about money. So when you look at someone who's going through a relationship breakdown, you need to think about all the financial concerns that are going around in the background. So she or he will need to revise their will and their lasting power of attorney. Whoever's left with the children may need to secure child support. The divorce process is brutal, and there will be a financial settlement involved of some sort. That may result in selling the family home and getting a new mortgage. They will need to update or source life insurance, critical illness cover, income protection. They may be entitled to state benefits, so it's making sure they're pushed in that direction. And they may be confused about how to manage or access new assets. They may have to deal with something called a pension share in order from divorce. So there's a lot of financial background going on when people are emotionally struggling. When you think about those experiencing bereavement, they just want to be able to grieve. And this is a big, big headache in terms of what's going on. So a bit like the person who's broken up with their partner, they will need a revised will or a lasting power of attorney. As I mentioned, you can signpost those to will writers, solicitors, or the government website. They also have to deal with inheritance tax planning and probate, which is where someone like I can help out. For older clients, they maybe have to consider long-term care. They may have to access the deceased assets and pensions and other accounts. They may have never managed their finances. They now need to deal with cash flow and how to just manage those finances. They may need to claim or review their insurances. There may be some mortgage planning involved. And again, they may be entitled to state benefits. So this again is the background financial noise for those who are living through grief. And then we have those who are suffering terminal or long-term illnesses. Again, wills and lasting power of attorney. And also, and this is a very delicate area, it's making them recognise that the more things in place, the less stress for the loved ones around them. They also may be able to claim on their life, critical illness or income protection policy. I have so many people who get poorly and they don't realise that they can actually access their insurance to make a claim. Some people may have to adapt or sell their homes to release funds or improve their standard of living. Again, there may be entitlement to state benefits. And depending on their age, they may actually be able to start accessing their private pensions or alternative investments if they have them. So ultimately, what I'm encouraging everyone to do is to seek professional help, either through that's in the Mental Health Foundation talks about reaching out to mental health services, financial advisors. If it's debt, there are debt charities, because financial stress makes such a big impact on financial well-being. And then by addressing financial stress, by giving financial education, by supporting, by seeking professional help, you know, the plan is to make sure that everyone feels better about their financial well-being and ultimately their mental health. So as I mentioned, I'm a counsellor of financial planning, but more detail on what financial planning means. So basically it's making managing your money simpler. It's about building long-term relationships. So at the moment when we work with our high street banks, we can't really have those long-term relationships. It's very hard to actually find someone who we can talk to about our finances. But what someone like I would do is to help you find your short, medium and long-term goals. So short could be maybe going traveling, maybe some house renovations, maybe debt. Medium could be buying a house. It could be maybe investing in a car. It may be sending children off to university. And long-term goals is ultimately talking about retirement and maybe downsizing. And then what I do is I create a comprehensive plan that covers your budget, your savings, your investments, your retirement plan, and ultimately risk management to make sure you're not doing anything risky. So as I've sort of touched on, the need for advice has never been greater. We need to think about what state support there is. You know, could you survive on a pension of under 12,000 a year, which is the current state pension? There's also greater emphasis on personal provision because the poor NHS is really struggling. We're living longer, so 1 in 4 babies born today will live to 100. And as we all know, there is very much an ever-changing economic climate going on at the moment. It feels pretty wobbly, and I think what we need then is to have as much stability as possible. And actually, financial planning needs are becoming more complex as we get older, as there are multiple pensions out there. You know, again, something I offer to clients is merging all their multiple pensions into one pot. So it can sort of grow to the best of its ability, but also they know what they have, when they can access it, what's in their funds, rather than it all just being a bit murky and confusing. So in terms of what we want you to do at the end of this session is to really start directing your financial future. So to maintain that financial wellness through being in control of your finances, create that budget, save and set for your goals. So whether they're short, medium and long term, create an emergency fund, please, to make sure that you're protected. So make sure you've got those insurances in place. Invest in tax efficient saving pots, so different ISAs, and make sure you're balancing risk with reward. Think about retirement and what you want and the funds you'll need. And bear in mind that things are unpredictable when it comes to our lives. You know, the cost of living is shooting up. There are unpredictable life events ahead of us, or we may already have experienced. Inflation is tough and we are living longer. And just bear in mind that financial control results in financial freedom. So what next and how do I work? Well, a bit like a counselling room, in a safe, non-judgmental space, I review your finances. There's empathy, there's good listening. That's really sort of making sure you make the right decisions. I look at your life plan, where you are, where you want to be. I look at your needs, your aims, your priorities. I create a financial life plan for you, and we maintain a long-term relationship where I manage your financial future. So if you need to claim on that insurance policy, you phone me. If you're having to deal with inheritance tax liability, you phone me. If you've got a problem with debt, we look how we can solve that. I'm there to sort of be that sort of regular contact and that regular support. So there's my details. You can find me on LinkedIn. I have a very complicated email, or alternatively, please just reach out to the Electrical Industries Charity and they will direct you to me as well. And I also want to really highlight the services of the Electrical Industries Charity. Lucy, did you want to do this bit, or I can? It's up to you.
More than happy to. Yeah, Anna, that was amazing. Just before we go on to a huge thank you in the questions, yeah, this is our services here. So if anything Anna said and it's really kind of hit home with you, please get in touch because we can absolutely help. And there's a list there of everything that we offer. So bereavement counselling, legal advice, advocacy, and we can get a support plan tailored to you. And there's our access assistance. So you can come through either our helpline that operates 9 till 5 Monday to Friday, or you can come through by email. Sometimes it's a bit easier kickstarting that conversation, not kind of on the phone. So whichever feels more comfortable, please do let us know.
Perfect. Right, I think that's everything. So I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you, Anna. You have. Okay. I mean, you're amazing.
Fast, don't I?
I was taking notes as I was going because I was like, my gosh, this is there was so much information in there, and the amazing things being recorded, so everyone could kind of listen back to it and take some bits away from it. I've got a few questions as well to ask you.
Absolutely.
Just from experiences with cases and just like friends and family and things as well. We've got one from Luke, and he said, is it worth paying AVCs into a pension scheme when you get taxed on anything above 12,570 when you take it out?
Yeah, I don't tend to work too much with AVCs, and that's something I probably would say, come to me and we'll sit down and we'll work it all out, because obviously a lot of to do with pensions is it being tax efficient. So we would just make sure that whatever you're doing, there's a limited amount of charges to ensure that if any charges are actually basically become insignificant because of the growth of the portfolio of the pension, if that makes sense.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And Paul's bit, there's just some reflections in there. I've been investing in ISAs the last 6 years, and more recently the cash ISAs have performed better than the stocks and shares ones.
Yeah, that would probably make sense at the moment, because you need to bear in mind that when it comes to investing, you tend to have a 10-year cycle, and within that cycle what you have is 2 years of drop, and then you have 8 years of growth. So obviously at the moment, because of the recent issues with Trump, things have been dipping quite a lot. So that would explain that. But what you'll also find that over time, cash tends to be eroded by inflation.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Someone here said, is it safe to consolidate all your pension pots into one?
Yes, it's often a really good idea, but how it works is we have to be very careful, because obviously everything we do is authorised by the Financial Conduct Authority. So you have to do something called a critical yield calculator that basically looks at all of your pensions, and it makes sure that by combining them, it's in your best interest and you will get the best result.
Okay, fab. Thank you, Anna. How many ISAs can you take out in 1 year?
So you can take out several, but you only have an allowance of 20,000. So bear that in mind.
Perfect. Just one from me. What would you say to someone who is living in their overdraft? Say they've got a few overdrafts, they've been living in them. Where's the first place to start with supporting them getting out of it? If they just feel kind of every time they get paid, their money's going straight into the overdrafts and they can't kind of get out of them. What's the bit of advice? That's probably a very broad question, isn't it?
No, but I also think it's a really common question, Lucy, and I think we've all found ourselves in that place. So what I would say is you almost need, that's when we go back to the budget and we really look at what's coming in and what's going out, and we really sort of think, let's not have that coffee for a bit. Let's not maybe have that takeaway for a bit. Let's find different ways of seeing friends and socializing. Really just be quite brutal with yourself and try and cut back so that you can start edging out of your overdraft. That's absolutely what I would say.
I remember when I first started years ago when I was hairdressing and I was getting paid an apprenticeship wage, and I think something that I did with it, budgeting just wasn't something that came into consideration, and I was trying to keep up with going out with friends that were kind of, you know, stylists and things, and I think that's something we do see a lot of people coming through, and also the fear of saying, I can't afford to buy that round of drinks.
Absolutely. And I think this is also what's so hard, Lucy. People are so scared to have conversations about money, and I actually think, you know, and it's the same with mental health, and I think the more conversations we can have, the more you will find that people relate to you and that people are in the same position, and it will make everyone feel a bit better about themselves. So yeah, I strongly encourage people to have conversations and to discuss things and to openly say, I will one day pay you back for this round, but I'm either just going to buy my own drink, or I'm going to turn down your drink and your round. You know, it's thinking in that way, just being really honest, because people have empathy and kindness, and if they don't, you don't want to be buying a round with them anyway. Yeah. So that's how we need to think.
Absolutely, that is absolutely. Is it better to overpay on your mortgage or invest any surplus cash into an ISA?
I would always say invest any surplus cash into an ISA, especially one that can grow, because what you'll find is a mortgage is the cheapest borrowing you can have. I know recently it's felt like they haven't been, but it is, and you're more likely to get growth in an investment compared to, obviously with the mortgage you're paying off a debt, but with investment you're going to get growth. So just bear in mind, a mortgage is always the cheapest borrowing option you can have.
Okay, fabulous, thank you. And I know it is only July, but it's one of those questions that starts cropping up getting to the middle of the year. With Christmas, if you say you have a family or just as a couple or who as an individual, and they get to December every year and they're like, my gosh, I've got Christmas presents and there's a long list and financially it's extremely difficult for them. What would you say is the best way to potentially start looking to save for Christmas? So if they struggle taking money out of that, is there any ways around saving for that you found really useful?
So there are lots of apps out there that allow you to have different pots, and that's how I would start thinking about it. So you could have a little pot for Christmas where you're just putting a little bit amount away each month. But also, and it sounds so hard, children and family just want to be with you, and it's also sort of thinking about, do they need to have that? Could there be a compromise where you're not spending quite that much on Christmas? But I think little pots, putting little bits away, really does help.
Yeah, I think there is so much pressure now to be keeping up with the newest toy or trainers and things. So I think, again, like you said, that piece around just being open and honest around what you can afford as well for them, and what really, really matters, being together at Christmas and being healthy and well.
And absolutely, I have really, so my children have obviously watched my experiences with finances, and don't be afraid to say to them, I can't afford this, because actually what I've noticed is that my children have a fantastic respect for money. You know, they don't actually ask for things very often, or it'll be very much a conversation of, you know, what chores can I do to save up for this? You know, they have such a great work ethic because they know how hard I've worked to have money. And I think, you know, the more we can kind of install those sorts of values, actually the better our children will be and the more resilient they will be. So I think, you know, it's much better to have a child that says, oh, you know, if it's tough, you know, could we start saving now, than to have a child that's demanding something. So it's also sort of thinking about it from a sort of social conscious area as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got another one here, which is, any advice, please, for anyone with a poor credit rating and then tempted to pay into payday loan companies? Or tempted by them?
Yeah, I would really try and avoid. It's really difficult without me knowing your full financial situation, but I think it's just really the more you can avoid that, the better. And again, start having a look at your budget. Have a look at what's going on. I know you probably may feel like there's sort of no way you can cut back. I don't know if there's anything. I mean, I have several jobs. I don't know if there's any opportunity for you to start finding an income from somewhere else to top you up. But sort of I would try and avoid as much as possible going down the payday loans area.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had Marcy's, we've been going on, has been putting some links into everything that you've said in there. We've got another one as well, just one more from me, which came up for me. So if you haven't got a power of attorney in place, who will it automatically go to?
Yeah, so it's difficult. So what will happen? So with your finances, it has to go to the courts in order to decide that they are approved to access your finances. When it comes to health issues, it will just be decided by doctors. So it depends if we have great respect for doctors, but they may be, putting wishes that you don't want to happen. So it's really, really important that we have those in place.
Yeah, I think I really took from it, Anna, you saying around wills and things like this, and it's like you just don't really. I personally was like, I don't need to think about that, not until years and years and years to come. But it is so important, isn't it, to be having these conversations now and getting things in place, because you never know what life's going to throw at you.
Absolutely. And also it's the same with insurances. So at the moment, I'm working with a lot of clients who I would say in their 50s, who are self-employed and haven't got any insurances, and they're panicking. And a lot of insurance companies are turning them down because obviously by the time you get to 50, there are various medical conditions you have. But the younger you take out those insurances, the cheaper they will be. And obviously you can have those forever. So even if at the age of 50 you suddenly do get diabetes, you took out that insurance policy then, so you've got it. So it's just always sort of thinking about those areas as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Anna, it's been amazing. Thank you so much. That's most of the questions of all of them have been answered. But if anyone does have any further questions, we've popped your details in there as well, and to reach out. So just the biggest thank you. You're incredible. You really are.
Thank you. No, I think you guys are an incredible charity, and I'm so proud to work with you guys. And actually, it all came about because Grace from the EIC got in touch because she saw I was doing wellbeing talks, and yeah, it's a really good partnership, and you should be so proud of what you offer the community. So thank you. It's lovely working with you. And yeah, any other questions, then just sort of just get in touch directly or via the EIC.
Lovely. Thank you, Anna, and thank you so much for joining, everyone. And we've all just popped a short feedback form into the chat. I'm wishing everyone a lovely day. And again, thank you so much, Anna.
Thank you very much.
Take care, everyone.